Hey guys, Ted here with Salty Cycles. Hey, in today's video I'm going to be removing a rear cassette from a set of DT Swiss wheels, putting them onto the rear wheel of a Shimano wheel set. You're going to need a couple of tools for this. First, you're going to need this tool here, which is a cassette removal tool. And if you've seen the previous video, you know that it can also be used to remove and install a brake rotor depending on the type of center lock ring you have. The other tool that comes in really handy is called a chain whip. And what this tool does is it holds the cassette in place from spinning when you're trying to loosen the lock nut on the cassette. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Okay, here we have the rear cassette on the DT Swiss wheels. Now what you can see in the center of the cassette is the lock ring. And you can see internal splines. It looks very similar to a previous video where we removed and installed a rotor for a disc brake setup that has internal splines on the lock. It's the same tool. So what we're going to do, it's righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So we set our ratchet to loosen. We put it in there, and as we go to loosen, you'll see the cassette wants to spin. So we use the chain whip, and we place it right over one of the cogs. See if I can get you a little better shot. So we place the chain on any of the gears, and then we press down on the chain whip, and then now when we press down on the ratchet, we're holding the cassette in place, and it breaks loose. And the lock ring comes off, just like that. Let's remove the chain whip. And now the cassette, even though each one of these gears is separate, I want to hold it all together, and it's just going to slide right off of the hub. And there's our cassette. Let's set that off to the side for right now. Before we go any further, I want to show you what the freewheel looks like. If you've seen the previous video where we removed the crank, I told you that Shimano has already thought about how do I know if I'm going to put these in alignment, and so they make the splines in such a way where the crank arm only goes on one way. Well, they've done something very similarly for you on the cassette. The freewheel has splines, and one of them is much bigger and noticeably wider than all the other ones, and so the cassette's only going to go on one way. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. You see the splines on the freewheel. You've got a really skinny one, got a little bit wider one, then they're all about the same width. Then we get to a really wide one, and then a really, really wide one. So do you notice that? That one is considerably wider than all the other splines. And that is going to be the alignment tool that we're going to use when putting on the gears. So when you look at a cassette, it is also splined. And you're going to have one of those, this one right that my index finger is on. It's going to be quite a bit wider than all the rest. And that is going to go down into that wider opening on the freewheel. So let me show you. So we find our much wider spline, and we find our much wider slot, and it slides right on. It will not go on any other way other than that way. And then you just start putting back on the next biggest gear. Now, you're probably going to have these spacers. So when you take your cassette off, make note of where those spacers are. So we put that on, put on a spacer. Put the next one on, put on a spacer, And that sequence is simply going to continue. And remember, it only goes on one way. You can't mess this up. And if for whatever reason they're not wanting to line up, you know it's not on the right way, and just keep looking for that key spline that's going to be your alignment tool. Now you're going to get to a few where it has a spacer built in, it's machined into it. So there is no spacer on that one. Usually the last two are going to have it machined into it. Okay. Let's put our lock ring back in. Now, just like when we installed the brake rotor, I want to do this by hand to start it because I do not want to cross the threads. All right, starting to tighten up. Let's get our ratchet going the right way. Now we don't need the chain whip here because we're going the direction that the freewheel is like. It's like as if you were pedaling, and we're tightening that locker ring down. Make sure that the cassette is nice and tight. There's no play between any of the gears, and you just changed a cassette. It really is that easy. With the right tools, a little bit of know-how, you can take your cassette on and off. I take mine off not too frequently, but when I want to do a really, really deep cleaning, it's easiest when you take it off and each gear is separate. You can really get in there with a cloth and some degreaser. Makes your drivetrain run quieter. Will definitely make it run longer without having to buy a new cassette, new chain, by keeping all the road grime and the filth out. Well guys, I hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thumbs up and comments, please, and we'll see you on the next video.